Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, founder and president of Kennetik Kommunications, Robert Kennedy III. Hey, what you drinking? I've been looking for this conversation, forward to this for several years now. And in a moment, you're going to understand why. When I first decided that I wanted to try my hand at this podcasting thing, I looked around and I tried to find the folks that I could reach out to, that I could touch, who were doing it at a pretty high level. And I ran across this dude, and I didn't even know what his name was, because every time I see him online, it was always RK3. That's me. Let's get into it. So with that, I am really excited to bring to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership audience one of my secret podcast mentors. He's moved on. He's doing a couple of other things, but Mr. Robert Kennedy III, RK3, dude, come on in.
Hey, listen, I know this is a jazz podcast, but you know I got to bring a little bit of hip hop with me. Come on,
Oh, man. I love it. I love it. I love it. Dude, you always do this at an incredibly high level, no matter how you're showing up, no matter what platform I've seen you in. I've seen you in person. I've seen you online. I still have your podcast saved as a favorite on Spotify. So I just can't wait to get into this conversation. But my audience knows that all of this is just getting to know you until I ask a really, really important question. So I hope they've heard everything that we've talked about so far, because here's the question. So what you drinking?
man. Right now, I'm drinking some Wegmans purified water.
Not from Wegmans. From Wegmans?
From Wegmans. You know, my wife buys the big, the big packets, the big pallet or whatever, makes the boys take it in from the trunk. Yeah, the Wegmans purified water. If y'all were on screen, I'd be holding it up to the camera right now. Come on, Wegmans.
Well, hey, man, actually, I spent some time working with Wegmans way back in my private life. But we may or may not get into that story, and chances are we won't. But that just means that you'll appreciate this, RK3. I gotta maintain the integrity of this podcast. If you're going to be drinking some Wegmans purified water, that just means I got to make sure I bring some whiskey to the game. And as I said earlier, this is a conversation that I've wanted to have for a while, but I felt a little pressure to make sure that my game was tight before I invited, before I invite, Mr. RK3. But this is classic. So I decided I would reach for a classic whiskey. And I thought about this because one of my good friends called me last night, and she asked what was the name of the whiskey that I shared with her when she came to visit. And the name of that whiskey, and what I will be drinking tonight, is I.W. Harper. It's a 15-year bourbon whiskey. And I say that it's classic because it's been around for years. It's got this cool little decanter looking bottle. So a lot of times if you go to some of the old time movies, old time shows, I can only think of like Bewitched. Darren would pull out a very crystal looking bottle. Chances are he was drinking some I.W. Harper. So it's been around for a bit, but I'm gonna crack this open. Let me go ahead and open this up and pour me a little some.
Did y'all hear that pop? That like, yeah.
For me a little bit. And everything I enjoy seems to have. I seem to pull some caramel notes and vanilla. Those are really important notes for me. And yeah, and this has that as well. So I'm going to enjoy this I.W. Harper. I would love for you to share a little bit of your background because you've got a bit of an exotic background. You've done quite a bit of things. But right now, you are one of my friends who does one of the things that most people say that they would never, ever, ever do. And that is speak in front of thousands of people and bare your soul and entertain and educate all at once. And you do that in an incredibly high level. So talk a little bit about your background and walk us up to what you're doing now so that we can get into this classic conversation.
Man, how long you got? This is my background. As you mentioned, quite a few things, twists and turns, valleys and mountains and upside down accidents, all sorts of stuff in my background. So I'll give you the abridged version and walk through some different areas. So out of college, I spent 3 years in the mental health industry. I was a counselor, an instructor, and then moved up to being a supervisor in a organization where we supported people who were mentally ill in the community. And that was one of those low paying, high hour, high turnover industries. And so I did spend a long time there. But while I was doing that, I got interested in radio. And so I started interning as a news anchor at a radio station, and eventually was offered the news anchor position at an AM radio station in the state of Massachusetts, where I was. Then I moved into the education space and I started to teach. So I taught high school physics and biology and physical science. My degrees in college I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in biology and one in history. And so my degrees enabled me to move into that space. And I taught for 8 years in the classroom. 1 year English, 1 year 7th grade English, but 7 years high school science. Now, while I was a teacher, I started 2 businesses. I started an online music promotion business, and that's another story for another day, but super funny. And then I started a web development company as an offshoot of that music promotion business, because essentially we were interviewing and promoting artists, and we found out that some of the independent artists that came to us didn't have websites. This was back in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so he said, ding, 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 business idea, called my brothers and said, hey dudes, let's put together a company and start building websites for some of these artists. And so I had those 2 companies while I was teaching at the time. I stopped teaching for a little bit to go back to school. But when I did that, I became a real estate agent. And so I was doing real estate for about 5 or 6 years while I was going back to school. And then while I did that, partway through that, I got back into education and was a online faculty in the biology department for an online university. And so I did that for a couple of years. Moved to the state of Maryland in 2008. And about 10 days after we got here, I had 3 kids under the age of 5 at the time. Lost my job online. And so I tried to apply for teaching gigs, et cetera, and tried to make things work, but I just was not getting any responses. And, I look back at it now, and my explanation of that time was just that it was God saying, dude, what are you doing? Stop trying to work for somebody else. That's not what I made you to do. And so, I started to build online courses for a university. A professor at a university hired me to build some online courses for her. I built about 3 of those. And then I said, you know what, let me start a company. And I found some resources and I started doing it. We built online courses for government orgs, U.S. Census Bureau, IRS, Barnes and Noble, Panda Restaurant Group. We did quite a bit of good work. And then as I was doing that, I found more and more that companies started to say, hey, can you not just build the courses for us? Can you teach us how to do it? And so I started to teach technical training for specific software on how to build courses. But I was also finding that while I was doing that, it wasn't just the software. There was an approach that I had that I was using that got their attention. And I was really focused on scenario-based learning, how to incorporate stories into the learning process and allow people to make choices, kind of like the choose your own adventure books when you were a kid. So I love to do that type of thing. And so I started to teach more of that, and some of that morphed into leadership training. I started to talk about how leaders can communicate more effectively, and like side conversations developed, and sometimes I got hired to do like conflict management, but it all always centered somehow around that leadership and communication space. And so now what I do is I'm a speaker, trainer, facilitator on confident communication and how to connect with your audience much more effectively. And I do that particularly now in the real estate space for real estate professionals who want to learn how to connect with their customers more confidently in person and on video.
Wow. And what was your degree in college on again? What did you get that degree in?
Biology and history.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sure those relate. I'm sure they connect.
Well, here's the deal. So when I was in high school, I took one of those career inventory tests. A lot of high schoolers take them. And my career inventory exam spat out that I would be suited for careers in, check this out, electrical engineering or communications. So, of course, I went to college and did biology. So, I mean, and a part of that was, growing up in the generation that we grew up, right? We are Xers. And so there were only certain careers that were kind of pushed. If I told my parents, hey, I want to do something in communications. Okay, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Is that a doctor? Is that a lawyer? Is that a teacher? Is that a pastor? Yeah, I don't understand that other stuff. Is it a nurse? What? I don't get that. So those were kind of like the accepted or easily explained careers. So I didn't know what to say. Hey, I want to do something in communications and electrical engineering. And so the funny thing about that is that as I look back at the career inventory exam, it perfectly explained me. Because now I am in the space of communications and connections, but I'm also somebody who's technical, who likes to pull things apart and put them together. And so not that I'm the rigid logical person, but I'm an organizer. I look at structures and frameworks. And so a big piece of what I teach in communication is how to framework or structure your communication for better connection.
Yeah. And if you guys are listening and you do like just a 15-second Google search on Robert Kennedy III, you're probably going to find some other Robert Kennedys. But, this Robert Kennedy III, you're going to see that he's always talking about or referencing frameworks and how can he create a framework or help you create a framework. So I can absolutely see that. But I keep going back to biology and history. And the reason I keep going back to that is because you're probably one of the better people that I could reach to help me articulate the connection between the three elements of this podcast: whiskey, jazz, and leadership, because on the surface, they don't necessarily connect. But I am sensing so much of jazz in your story. And let me talk to you a little bit about what I mean by whiskey, jazz, and leadership. Everyone knows I like all three literally. I like all three literally. I also love the metaphor of whiskey, jazz, and leadership. So for me, the metaphor of whiskey is doing what you enjoy with your crew, with like-minded folks who get you, the folks you hang out with, irregardless of what the other folks may say about what it is that you're doing, because they're not part of the crew anyway. They might get a vote on Tuesday, but if this isn't Tuesday, we really don't care what they have to say. That's whiskey for me. Jazz is this idea of feeling the room, feeling the environment. Yeah, you've got some things that you've got to do, but it's really about the nuance. It's about finding your way, finding your path, even in situations where the charted path is falling apart, or maybe there is no charted path. You still have to find a way to navigate your life, and that requires some jazz. And for me, the metaphor of leadership is, it's great to strategize. It's great to talk about what we might do someday. But until someone takes a stand and says, we're going to build the dadgum website, or we're going to take this direction starting now, or we're going to invest the money in this thing and I'm cutting the check today. Until someone makes that definitive step, whatever that step is, this is all conversation. And for me, leadership is action. There has to be an action at the end of being a leader. And so for me, those three things fit together in my head. That's kind of how I process things. I'm sensing a lot of jazz in your career. How does that metaphor fit with how you do things? Does that make sense to anybody but me?
You know, it makes sense to my wife now. But so if we're talking about jazz, as a musician, I grew up as a musician as well. So I played keyboards, I played drums, I played saxophone, clarinet, I played bass. Messed around with quite a few different things. So I grew up, and the standard way to learn music was you put the Michael Aaron book in front of everybody, or the Baum book. Is it Baum or Schaum? One of them, Schaum's book in front of it, and you learn by the notes. And so I was learning the typical classical way of playing. And one day my mom came into the room and she heard me playing a song, and she, "Where'd you learn that? Where's the music for it?" I said, "I just heard it." And I started playing it. And she said, "Oh, you got that like just in your head by ear?" And I said, "Yeah." And so she allowed me, because my mom was my first music teacher. And so she allowed me to start to play more and mess around with songs and music by ear. And that expanded how I looked at music, right? It wasn't just, okay, yep, I've got to play the notes exactly. I now began to hear what I wanted to hear and ad lib and add some stuff inside of that. So then in high school, my dad was like, "Okay, this is what you like, and you seem to want to expand a little bit past." So my dad he found a jazz theory school and sent me to learn jazz theory. And so the essence of jazz theory was, my teacher would say, "Okay, here's the sheet music on this. Now I want you to add you to it." And so I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, this is what jazz is. It's kind of like this space, but a lot of it is feeling, and and the notes can't always be written for jazz." And so he said, you know the timing, the time signature of the song, but the notes can't always be written. So can you play this? Can you play it like you?" So I said, "Okay." And, and I would start to add the fills, and I'd add the ad libs and the runs, etc. So I think about that like my life as well. There have been some traditional structures that have been placed in front of me. Some traditional ways of growing and choosing careers and going about life. And when those no longer fit, or when I learned enough about them, I wanted to add me to them. And so I started to just kind of play around and figure out, okay, what are these things that I've done? What are the different spaces that I've been? How do I merge them together? And so the fact that now I've got this business where I speak about leadership and communication to real estate professionals, it's kind of like loves and passions just kind of balled up into this one space. And the journey that I took to get here has been just like you said. It's just been jazz, man.
This is perfect. This is perfect. And I love, there's so much I love about your story and how you brought it together. The first thing I really picked up on is, first you learned the technical way to do things. You didn't jump in day one saying, hey, music sounds cool. Let me show you how to do it my way. Let me put some me. You had to learn the notes. You had to learn the sheet music. You had to learn the rhythms and the technical elements of it. And then you got to a point where literally the direction was add some you to it. How important would you say it is for leaders in particular to learn the notes, to learn the scales, to learn the fundamentals before they start insisting that everyone follows their inspiration?
Yeah. I don't know if I would always say it's a before thing. Sometimes it may be on the way. So, and as an example, when I was starting out speaking, I would get these gigs where a training company or a university would say, hey, here's this PowerPoint, go train it. And so there would be no script. It would just, I would have to figure out what the PowerPoint was. And then I would just add Robert to it. Go all the way through. And then I applied to this company or tried to partner with this company. And they said, yeah, we love what you do. Come on and you'll go through our onboarding process. They had inside of their PowerPoint notes, they had scripts, they had everything, and they wanted me to learn it and repeat it and say it exactly as they did because they wanted their brand to shine through. And so it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done. Man, I was getting upset at it because I went to the company headquarters to train out west and I was doing this thing and the company owner, after a little bit, they were like, Robert, I mean, we've given you everything we need that we can. I don't know what the block is. We saw you when you interviewed with us and it was great. It was fantastic. But I don't know why you're not getting over this hump. And so I memorized and memorized and memorized. And then I was doing a training with them one day. The CEO was there and she said to me, oh my gosh, I finally just saw Robert come through because I had to learn the script and I had to learn the nuances and I had to learn the transitions and how to read the room and how to do the coaching element of it. And I had to learn those things. And then once I inhaled those things and I could kind of breathe those things, then I was able to say, okay, cool. Let me put my secret sauce on top of this baby now, right? And so I think as leaders, you've got to be able to understand the baseline of leadership. And the baseline of leadership is people, right? You got to be able to say, okay, what are the basic behaviors of people? What are the basic ways that you connect with people? How do people operate? Because people are not that different. If you're a leader and you're trying to figure out all of these different ways and just being random and you don't have a way to navigate situations because you don't have an understanding of people, you're going to be recreating or reinventing the wheel every time. You're going to create confusion. You're going to make it much harder on yourself. So what is the baseline of people? I mean, I think before the show, you asked me about my favorite leadership book. It's Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John Maxwell, right? And so what is it that causes connection with people? If as a leader, you understand that as your baseline, man, you won the battle. You are ahead of the game and you can then add you on top of that.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit more about this idea of connection, because as John Maxwell says, and we got to take a moment to pause for like one of the members of the leadership Mount Rushmore, and that's John Maxwell. Everyone communicates, everyone talks, and very often we think that talking is connecting. We think that if I'm in front of the group, if I'm in front of an audience and I'm talking, well, my job is done. And, I said the 13 things I was supposed to say, and they applauded. Actually, when I was done, they applauded. That's not necessarily the same as connecting. Why is connecting so important?
If I hear somebody speak and I think in the moment, oh, this is good stuff, it's good information, then you ask me that afternoon or you ask me a week later, hey, what did Galen speak about? And I have no idea what he said. I just, oh yeah, it was good while I was there. What was your takeaway, or what's the main thing that you took away from it? Mm, uh, and they have trouble remembering, then you haven't connected. When you connect, you become memorable. When you connect, you become, is almost like this alien synergy. You become merged in experiences with the people that you're in that space with. And connection is crucial because it allows people to know that you not only understand who they are, but you understand how they are. You understand the experiences that they've gone through, and that you don't minimize those experiences. You empathize with those experiences, and you're not just saying it because you read it in a book. You're saying it because either you've been through it, you know someone who's been through it, you can articulate it in a way that allows them to say, yeah, this person's a human being, like a real human being like me.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.